Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more billionaire love stories that will steal your heart and leave you breathless. In the dim glow of a small-town bonfire party, Emma Jameson's laugh carried through the smoke like a song that didn't know it was being heard. She had always lived a simple life, working double shifts at the local diner, painting her dreams in a notebook no one had ever read. That night, under a canopy of stars, her world collided with someone it had no business meeting. Damien Rothwell, the heir to a billion-dollar empire. He was only there on a dare from his frat brothers, far from his marble world of penthouses and private jets. She caught his eye not because of her beauty, though she was beautiful, but because she looked like she actually meant every word she spoke. They talked for hours by the fire, his silk shirt rolled up and her fingers smudged with paint, two strangers drawn together by something unspoken. When he kissed her, it wasn't careful or planned. It was wild and reckless, like neither of them believed it could ever happen again. But it did, once more, alone in her tiny apartment, where the silence made everything feel more real. And by morning, he was gone. No note, no number, just the memory of his cologne and the ache of something unfinished. Emma waited for a text that never came, her heart stubbornly hopeful even as the hours turned into days. She told no one about the night, choosing to bury it beneath layers of routine and responsibility. Damien returned to New York, his world resuming at the speed of light, and the girl with the paint-streaked hands became a memory he tried not to remember. His father had plans for him, corporate takeovers, political alignments, and a bride who came with a legacy of mergers. Damien told himself it had meant nothing, that Emma was a beautiful mistake in a lonely moment. But every time he looked at his fiancée, Charlotte Kingsley, all he could see were the wrong things: forced smiles, cold hands, a future written by someone else. Emma, meanwhile, discovered something unexpected 3 weeks later, a growing life inside her, half hers, half his. She stood in her bathroom with the test in hand, tears falling not out of fear, but out of quiet resolve. She would raise this child with or without Damien Rothwell, because love didn't wait for apologies. She named the baby to be Hope before she ever knew if it was a boy or girl, because that's what it gave her. The next few years were a blur of diapers, night shifts, and moments of overwhelming grace. Emma never reached out to Damien, not because she hated him, but because she refused to beg anyone to care. Hope had his eyes, his stubborn chin, and a laugh that could melt steel. They lived in a cozy two-bedroom over a bookstore, with fairy lights and hand-painted murals lining the nursery. Emma found joy in simple things: reading bedtime stories, painting portraits of her daughter, building a life from scratch. Her friends called her strong, but she didn't feel strong. She felt tired and terrified, and more in love with her daughter every day. Sometimes, she'd glance at Damien's name on Google, see photos of him in designer tuxedos and beside his glamorous fiancée, and wonder if he ever remembered. But she would close the laptop, kiss her daughter's forehead, and remind herself that her worth wasn't defined by anyone's silence. Hope grew like wildflowers, smart, curious, and full of joy, and Emma knew she was doing something right. Still, in her quietest moments, she'd whisper into the night, "One day he'll know." Meanwhile, Damien's wedding was fast approaching, planned down to the hour by people who didn't know how to love, only how to organize. He walked through tastings, tux fittings, and vow riding like a sleepwalker, each step feeling heavier than the last. Charlotte was everything the world expected of a Rothwell bride: elegant, educated, and completely uninterested in who Damien really was. He tried to convince himself it was enough, that love wasn't necessary for a successful marriage, only compatibility and control. But every night, in the quiet of his penthouse, he dreamed of soft freckles, paint-stained hands, and the girl who had looked at him like he was a person, not a prince. He never told anyone about Emma, not even his closest friends. It was his secret shame, a memory that burned too close to his truth. His mother noticed something was off, but she said nothing, too accustomed to the Rothwell way of pretending everything was fine. As the wedding neared, the pressure grew until he began to dread the future he was supposedly lucky to have. And somewhere deep inside, the boy who once danced around a bonfire with a girl from nowhere still screamed for air. But there was no way out, at least, not one that didn't destroy everything his family had built. Emma, now a freelance illustrator and part-time art teacher, was hired to provide floral arrangements for an exclusive New York wedding. She needed the money, and the job was handled through an agency. No names, no personal details, just instructions. Hope stayed with her friend Maggie for the weekend while Emma traveled to the city, excited for the rare chance to work on something big. She was tasked with arranging the bride's bouquet and centerpieces at the venue, a glamorous estate in Westchester County. Emma didn't realize whose wedding it was until she arrived and saw the name Rothwell carved into the marble entry arch. Her hands trembled as she carried lilies into the grand ballroom, the scent of orchids suddenly overwhelming. She hadn't seen him in 5 years, and now she was delivering flowers for his marriage to someone else. She considered walking away, but then she remembered Hope's eyes and the pride of never running from anything. So she stayed, holding her head high, preparing the floral arch where the man who abandoned her would promise forever to someone else. And fate, always listening, had its own twist planned. Damien stood in front of the mirror in his dressing room, adjusting his cufflinks with mechanical precision, his reflection looking more like a stranger each day. The tuxedo fit perfectly. The room was filled with well-wishers and expensive champagne, but nothing felt right, least of all his own heartbeat. He hadn't slept well in weeks, plagued by strange dreams and a feeling that something important was just out of reach. His best man joked about cold feet, but Damien only nodded, unable to laugh, weighed down by an emptiness no wealth could fix. He heard murmurs from the hall about a stunning woman setting up flowers, someone unfamiliar, whose name no one knew. When he stepped out to see what the fuss was about, he caught only a glimpse of auburn hair disappearing behind a floral arch. His heart stopped for a fraction of a second, as if it recognized something before his mind could catch up. He dismissed it as nerves, telling himself the past was past, and today was about the future, no matter how unconvincing it sounded. The ceremony was only hours away, and he was expected to smile, kiss, and sign his life over to a woman he barely loved. But that flicker in his chest, unsettling and familiar, refused to be ignored. Emma worked quickly and silently, her hands steady even as her insides trembled with every step she took inside the Rothwell estate. Each bouquet she assembled became a small battle won against panic, pride, and a memory that had never truly left her. She didn't expect to see Damien face to face. Her role was background, invisible, temporary, but fate had a cruel sense of humor. She was placing the bridal bouquet gently on a pedestal near the front when she turned around and nearly collided with him. His breath caught, her eyes widened, the air between them thickened with recognition and something far more dangerous. 5 years vanished in an instant, replaced by the echo of a kiss, the weight of silence, and the question hanging unspoken. Why? Emma, he said, his voice hoarse, like it had aged since he last saw her. She nodded, lips pressed into a calm smile that barely held back the storm inside her. I'm just here to do the flowers, she whispered, her voice so steady it made him feel like the weak one. And before he could say a word more, she turned and walked away, leaving him haunted all over again. The rest of the preparations blurred into a daze for Damien, every silk ribbon and polished table reminding him of the one thing he didn't expect. He tried to focus on the ceremony, on the vows written for him by an assistant, on the woman he was about to marry, but his mind betrayed him. Emma was back, different, stronger, more composed, and her presence made everything else feel fake. He found himself drifting through the mansion like a ghost, hoping to catch a glimpse of her again, needing answers he wasn't ready to face. Meanwhile, Emma retreated to the staff lounge, hands shaking as she stared at her phone's lock screen, a photo of Hope smiling on her 4th birthday. She hadn't expected to see him, hadn't prepared for the way it would make her question everything she thought she had buried. But she reminded herself that he didn't deserve to know. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Not until he proved he was more than a wealthy coward. She decided she would leave as soon as the bouquet was delivered. She didn't need closure, not anymore. But fate, once again, refused to let things go quietly. The coordinator entered the room frantically, announcing that the maid of honor had fainted and the bride needed someone, anyone, to carry the flowers. Emma stared in disbelief as the coordinator begged her to step in. Just for the entrance, just for the bouquet, nothing more. she protested, but the woman insisted, claiming the bride had seen her and approved witout even knowing her name. Maybe Charlotte had just wanted someone elegant, or maybe fate was simply enjoying its twisted sense of irony. With trembling hands, Emma took the bouquet she had arranged herself. White roses, lilies, and just a single sprig of lavender. She walked slowly toward the grand hallway, the doors to the ceremony looming ahead like gates to a past she couldn't escape. Behind those doors, Damien stood waiting, unaware that the woman walking down the aisle was not his bride, but the one he had walked away from. The music swelled, the guests stood, and every eye turned to her, except his, until the last possible second. When their eyes met, something shattered in his chest, something ancient and full of regret and revelation. Emma held his gaze, every step a quiet scream of strength, every heartbeat reminding him of everything he'd left behind. And in that moment, the wedding stopped being about a union and became a reckoning. As Emma reached the altar, she handed the bouquet to the stunned officiant and stepped to the side, her posture calm but her heart racing. Damien couldn't take his eyes off her, his fiancée whispering his name twice before he even realized the ceremony was supposed to begin. He opened his mouth to speak, to ask 100 questions, but no sound came out, only awe and ache and a silence full of memories. Emma looked down, took a breath, and leaned forward to whisper something only he could hear. "She has your eyes." It was a sentence that detonated like a bomb inside him, leaving him visibly shaken, knees wobbling beneath the weight of what he had just heard. Charlotte turned sharply, confusion etched into her perfect features as Damien took a stumbling step back. Guests murmured, the air shifted, the music stopped. And there, in front of everyone, Damien dropped to his knees, not out of pain, not out of embarrassment, but out of truth. The truth he had run from, the life he had abandoned, the love that had never died. And so, the wedding that was meant to be the beginning of a perfect lie instead became the moment he fell completely, irreversibly, to his knees for the truth. The room was silent, as if the entire mansion held its breath, unsure of whether to witness a meltdown or a miracle. Damien's hands trembled as he looked up at Emma, her words echoing in his ears like thunder inside a cathedral. Charlotte demanded to know what was going on, her voice sharp and controlled, but her eyes filled with dread. Emma said nothing more, stepping back quietly, her presence a challenge that dared him to face what he had ignored for 5 years. Damien stood slowly, his chest heaving, his thoughts racing toward one thing and one thing only, the child she spoke of. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice raw and barely audible as he turned to Emma with desperation in his eyes. The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly, but no one paid him any mind. This was no longer a wedding. It was a reckoning. Emma hesitated, then nodded once, the truth laid bare in the silence between them. Charlotte's face went pale, her lips parting in disbelief as she realized she was no longer the center of his world, if she ever had been. And with the eyes of high society watching, Damien took another step toward Emma and away from the life he was supposed to marry. After the chaos broke, guests were politely ushered out of the room by staff, trained in scandal control. Charlotte stormed off without a word, her heels clacking like gunshots against the marble as her bridesmaids trailed behind, whispering. Emma, though shaken, remained still, clutching her hands to stop them from shaking again. Damien approached her cautiously, as though afraid she might vanish if he blinked too hard. "I didn't know," he said, pain laced with guilt and disbelief threading through every word. "I know," she replied, her voice cool but not cruel, laced with 5 years of growth and self-protection. He asked about the child, his name, his age, his life, but Emma corrected him softly. "Her name is Hope. She's 4. That single sentence cracked something inside him, the kind of fracture that never quite heals the same again. They stood in a side corridor, far from the chandeliers and champagne, but closer to something real than either had been in years. And in that hallway of broken plans, 2 people began to rediscover what was never truly lost. Emma told him everything, not all at once, but in pieces she had held close for years like old letters. She told him about the pregnancy test, about the nights crying alone, about the way Hope asked if her daddy was a superhero. Damien listened in silence, not out of guilt but out of reverence for the woman he had once walked away from. She showed him a photo of their daughter, freckles, big green eyes, a mischievous smile, and he almost dropped the phone. "I missed everything," he whispered, more to himself than to her, his voice trembling with regret. Emma didn't sugarcoat the struggle, nor did she weaponize it. She simply told the truth, and that was more powerful than blame. He asked to meet Hope, not tomorrow or next week, but as soon as Emma would allow. She hesitated, still unsure if he was the man she once kissed beneath stars, or just another billionaire used to getting his way. But something in his eyes, raw, stripped of ego, made her nod slowly. "She's with a friend nearby," Emma said. "You can meet her, but this time, don't run." They met in Central Park later that afternoon, the wedding long forgotten, replaced by something infinitely more important. Hope was building a sandcastle when Damien first saw her, and the world tilted sideways at the sight of her. She looked up at him with the innocent curiosity of someone who hadn't yet learned to fear abandonment. "Hi," she said, offering him a half-melted popsicle like it was a peace treaty between two strangers. Damien knelt down, tears threatening to betray him, and said softly, "Hi, I'm Damien." Emma stood nearby, heart pounding, watching the man she once loved fumble over emotions money could never buy. Hope tilted her head. "Are you Mommy's friend?" Damien looked at Emma, then back at the little girl who carried his entire world in her eyes. "I hope to be," he said, his voice barely holding together, and for the first time in years, he meant every word he spoke. And so began the most fragile and beautiful first meeting between a father and a daughter who didn't yet know what he meant to her. Over the next few days, Damien stepped into a new role with cautious wonder and relentless determination. He joined them at the bookstore where Emma worked, marveling at how Hope ran the aisles like they were enchanted forests. He brought crayons, picture books, and his own awkward attempts at bedtime stories, slowly stitching himself into their lives. Emma watched carefully, not judging, but protecting, because her heart had learned not to trust easily. Damien asked endless questions, favorite foods, bedtime songs, what made Hope laugh the hardest, and Emma answered every one. He apologized more than once, not just for leaving, but for not searching, not wondering, not knowing. Emma reminded him that she hadn't reached out either, not because she was punishing him, but because she had needed to become whole on her own. They began to talk late at night, after Hope was asleep, about everything and nothing, like they had all those years ago. There were no promises, just moments, shared smiles, lingering glances, and the quiet electricity of two souls orbiting each other again. And while the world whispered rumors and tabloids speculated, Emma and Damien simply existed, choosing presence over performance. Charlotte, unsurprisingly, did not take the cancellation well. She threatened lawsuits, public scandals, and financial revenge. But Damien faced her with the first true conviction he'd shown in years, making it clear he wouldn't marry someone out of fear or family pressure. His parents were furious, but secretly relieved that their son had finally stopped playing a part in their empire's script. Emma offered no commentary on his battles. She simply watched, curious to see who Damien truly was when not wearing his mask. Hope, oblivious to adult politics, continued to bloom with her father's sudden presence, asking each night if Dammy would come back tomorrow. Damien did everything to prove he would, even if it meant unlearning a lifetime of avoidance and wealth-fueled distraction. He sat through tea parties, finger-painted butterflies, and even wore a pink tiara once. Emma had never seen him so human. They laughed together again, not because they were falling in love, but because they remembered how to be light in a heavy world. Still, there was hesitation in Emma's heart, a fear that he'd vanish again, or worse, disappoint their daughter. And Damien knew he couldn't just win her love. He had to earn her trust. One rainy afternoon, Hope got sick, and Emma panicked, the kind of panic only a single parent knows too well. Damien was there in minutes, soaking wet from running in the storm, carrying medicine, soup, and worry all over his face. He stayed up all night beside Hope's bed, holding her tiny hand and whispering stories until her fever broke. Emma watched from the doorway, a lump in her throat, seeing a man she never knew he could become. That night, when Hope was finally asleep, Damien turned to Emma and said, "I don't want to be a visitor in her life." Emma's eyes filled with tears, the walls around her heart cracking with every honest word he spoke. I want to be her father, he continued, not just in name, but in every scraped knee, every bedtime, every birthday. Emma nodded, her voice caught between fear and longing, her heart desperate to believe him this time. You have to stay, she whispered. Not for me, for her. And he answered without hesitation. I already am. The media eventually moved on, and whispers of scandal became yesterday's headlines. Emma and Damien kept their lives quiet, avoiding limelight and choosing real moments over magazine spreads. He offered to move her and Hope into a new home, but Emma refused charity. She didn't want luxury. She wanted love. Instead, he bought the building where she worked, not to impress her, but to ensure she'd never be evicted again. Emma slowly let him in, not just into her life, but into her heart, cautiously and with intention. He never pushed, never rushed. He understood now that trust was a slow bloom, not a firework. One night, under fairy lights in the bookstore's back garden, they danced barefoot while Hope giggled behind the curtains. It wasn't a proposal, not yet, but it was something just as precious, a promise made in silence. Emma leaned into him, resting her head against his chest, where a heartbeat finally matched hers again. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt like they were holding back. Emma painted again, something she hadn't done in years, not for work, but for joy. She painted Hope's smile, Damien's hands holding teacups, and the messy beauty of their new, untraditional family. Damien framed every piece and hung them in his once sterile penthouse, turning it into a gallery of second chances. Hope grew bolder, stronger, and more curious, constantly asking questions about love, stars, and the meaning of forever. Emma explained that forever isn't always about promises. It's about the people who stay when it matters most. Damien took Emma and Hope on a quiet trip to the countryside. Just the three of them. No press, no business. They picked apples, told stories by the fire, and watched sunsets with fingers intertwined. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was real, and that was more than enough. Emma no longer feared the future, because she had already survived her past and found something better on the other side. And Damien, once the boy who ran, had become the man who stayed. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who believes in second chances. Back in the city, life settled into a new rhythm. Quiet mornings, chaotic breakfasts, and laughter echoing off apartment walls. Emma had never imagined this kind of love, not the passionate whirlwind of fantasy, but the steady, patient kind that grows roots. Damien had learned that money could build houses, but love built homes, and Emma was the blueprint. They still had challenges, co-parenting, media pressure, balancing careers and naps, but they faced it together. One evening, while walking home from the bookstore, Hope grabbed both their hands and said, "Are we a family now?" Emma looked at Damien, who simply smiled and nodded, his grip tightening as if he'd never let go again. "Yes, baby," Emma whispered. "We always were." And with the night sky above them, the three of them walked into a future that wasn't planned, but was exactly what they needed. Because sometimes, the best love stories don't begin at the altar. They begin the moment someone refuses to walk away again. A year had passed since the day Emma walked into Damien's wedding with a bouquet and a truth that shattered everything. Their lives were now stitched together with routines, school drop-offs, weekend park visits, bookstore nights, and quiet dinners at home. Hope had blossomed under the warmth of having both her parents around, her laughter now a daily melody in their home. Damien had sold his stake in one of his largest companies to spend more time with his family, a move that stunned the business world. Emma encouraged his transformation but reminded him gently that love couldn't be bought with sacrifices. It had to be nurtured every day. They lived simply, despite his wealth, in a modest brownstone that Emma helped decorate with secondhand treasures and Hope's crayon art. Damien learned to enjoy slow mornings and burnt pancakes, and Emma found herself smiling more than she ever remembered. They weren't married, not yet, but their love was evident in every glance, every shared silence, every small kindness. Hope called them Team 3, and the name stuck, becoming their secret family motto. And though the world outside buzzed with noise, their little trio had found peace in each other. Damien planned a quiet surprise, something meaningful, not grand, that would show Emma how much she meant to him. He contacted the old motel where they had met that night years ago and bought the land after learning it had been abandoned. Instead of tearing it down, he turned it into a community art space, naming it the Hope Center. Emma was speechless when he took her there, the crumbling walls now filled with murals, children's art, and colors bursting from every corner. He explained how that night had changed his life, and how he wanted others to find hope in forgotten places too. Emma walked through the space in tears, her past and future colliding in brushstrokes and intention. Hope ran through the halls with a paintbrush, laughing as she added stars to a wall mural titled Beginnings. Damien handed Emma a key, not just to the building, but to his heart again, in a new and profound way. This place was born from a mistake, he said, but it grew into something worth remembering, just like us. Emma hugged him tightly, understanding that sometimes redemption comes not through words, but through creation. Emma's artwork began to gain attention after local news featured the Hope Center and her story. She was offered gallery space and interviews, but turned most of them down, preferring her quiet world. Still, she agreed to one exhibit, one that would showcase her journey and how healing and motherhood had shaped her as an artist. Damien supported her every step, building frames, adjusting lights, and even designing the gallery pamphlets with Hope's help. The night of the opening, Emma stood in a simple blue dress, watching strangers connect with pieces that once held her brokenness. One painting, a faceless man holding a bouquet at a wedding altar, drew particular attention. It was called Closure. Damien bought it anonymously, hung it in their bedroom, and told her, "Now we'll always remember where our real story began." Hope wore a flower crown that night and told every guest, "My mommy made all this." Emma smiled, tears brimming in her eyes, not for pain, but for joy fully realized. That night, beneath city lights and whispered congratulations, she kissed Damien like it was the first time. Their relationship was far from perfect. There were disagreements about parenting, clashing schedules, and Damien's occasional overprotectiveness. Emma insisted on boundaries, reminding him that love meant respect, not control, and Damien listened, learning to grow beside her. They navigated the push and pull of co-parenting and partnership with honesty, sometimes frustration, but always care. Hope became the anchor, reminding them of what truly mattered every time things felt uncertain. One night, after an especially tense week, Damien wrote Emma a letter instead of speaking, pouring his heart into pages of raw vulnerability. She cried as she read it, realizing how deeply he was trying to be the man she and Hope needed. She wrote him back, not with flowery words, but with promises etched in truth. "I choose you, even when it's hard." They made a pact to check in every Friday night, just the two of them, no phones, no distractions, just them. These small rituals became their lifeline, proof that even strong love needs tending. And through these trials, their bond only deepened, weathered by storms, but never broken. Emma began leading art workshops for single mothers at the Hope Center, turning her story into a catalyst for others. She mentored women who had been abandoned, lost, or silenced, helping them find power in color and canvas. Damien watched her in awe, humbled by the woman he once left behind and grateful he had been given another chance. Hope started school and proudly brought handmade crafts to every class labeled, "For Daddy." Their fridge was covered in glitter hearts, macaroni portraits, and scribbled love notes from their daughter. Damien's board meetings grew fewer as he invested more time into causes Emma believed in. Together, they started a foundation supporting young mothers and creative healing, combining business with heart. Emma never stopped being cautious, but she finally allowed herself to believe in forever again. And Damien, once haunted by regret, had transformed into a man shaped by purpose. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were thriving, as a family, as lovers, as partners. On a foggy autumn morning, Hope asked a question that took them both by surprise. "Why aren't you two married if you love each other so much?" Emma and Damien exchanged a look, one filled with 1,000 unsaid things and quiet smiles. They hadn't avoided marriage. They had simply never needed it to validate what they shared. But Hope's question lingered in their minds as the day passed and the leaves fell around them. That evening, as the three cuddled under a blanket with hot cocoa, Damien kissed Emma's temple and whispered, "What do you think?" She smiled, heart steady and sure, and said, "Maybe it's time we stop being afraid of happily ever after." The next morning, Damien asked Hope to help him plan something special. They crafted handmade decorations, baked cupcakes, and turned the backyard into a garden of fairy lights. And with Hope holding the ring in a flower box, Damien knelt beneath the stars and asked Emma the only question that mattered. She said yes, not with tears or gasps, but with a steady voice that echoed with quiet joy. They married in their backyard weeks later, surrounded by friends from the bookstore, mothers from the Hope Center, and a bouncing, giggling Hope as flower girl. Emma wore a gown stitched with pieces of blue fabric, each one representing a chapter of her journey. Damien wrote his own vows, filled with humor, humility, and the most honest apology he had ever given. "I left you once," he said, "but I will never walk away again. Not from you, not from her, not from us." Hope cried louder than anyone, then laughed and yelled, "Now we're really a team." They didn't have a first dance. They had a first group hug, tangled in love and laughter. The night ended with Emma painting stars on Damien's face while Hope twirled in her flower crown. And in that simple celebration, they found a kind of joy that even the richest man couldn't buy. Was, finally, everything Emma had waited for. Not perfection, but peace. Years passed, and their love deepened like aged wine. Less fiery, more profound, endlessly comforting. Hope grew into a bold, artistic soul like her mother and fiercely loyal like her father. They took road trips in a beat-up van Emma insisted on keeping. Even though Damien could buy 10 better ones, they filled it with memories, Polaroids taped to the ceiling, snacks in the glove box, and laughter spilling from the windows. Emma's art was displayed internationally now, but she always returned to the Hope Center to teach. Damien became a sought-after speaker on business ethics and healing leadership, always crediting the women in his life. Their lives were far from conventional, but they had written their own story with bold, honest strokes. Love was no longer a question of if, but a practice of how. Every day, with intention. Hope once said, "Our life is a painting that never ends," and they both agreed. Because the best stories are the ones that grow with you. On the 5th anniversary of the Hope Center, Emma hosted a special event honoring all the women who had found healing there. Damien stood in the back, holding Hope's hand, watching Emma speak with grace and power. "She's amazing," Hope whispered. "She always has been," Damien replied, eyes full of pride and devotion. Emma dedicated a mural that day, a sweeping, colorful piece titled "After the Kiss." It depicted a woman walking away from a man in a suit, her hand on her belly, and a glowing child, leading them home. Tears flowed freely from the crowd, and Damien's did too. Unashamed and grateful, they celebrated not just survival, but transformation, of love, of pain, of people. And as Emma kissed him beneath the mural, Damien whispered, "Thank you for coming back." And she answered, "Thank you for finally staying." If you love this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who believes love deserves a second chance. In the years to come, Emma and Damien continued building. More than wealth, more than success, they built legacy. Hope became a storyteller, inspired by her mother's paintbrush and her father's courage. They grew older, but never apart, finding new reasons every day to choose each other. Their story became one told at the Hope Center, a reminder that even broken beginnings can lead to beautiful endings. Emma's laughter remained Damien's favorite sound, and his arms her favorite place to fall asleep. They danced often, even if there was no music, even if only in the kitchen at midnight. And every time someone asked how it all started, Emma would say with a smile, "After one kiss, he almost lost everything." But the truth was, that kiss didn't break them. It began the journey home. And for the rest of their lives, they walked it hand in hand, with hope lighting the way.